Hey, you're watching Confession Multiverse, the channel where we bring you the most unforgettable confessions, straight from the people who lived them. The church was dressed in shadows, draped in muted grays and the pale flicker of candlelight. Outside, a light drizzle tapped against the stained glass windows, as if the sky itself was weeping along with us. Inside, the air was thick with the perfume of lilies, roses, and melting wax. Every sound seemed sharper. The shuffle of shoes on wooden floors, the muffled sobs of relatives, the slow creak of pews as people shifted their weight. At the front of the aisle, my mother's casket lay surrounded by white flowers. A framed photo of her rested on a small stand, smiling, radiant, alive. I could barely look at it without my chest tightening, a knot of grief choking me. I should have been able to focus on her, to think about the woman who raised me, who taught me strength, who sacrificed more than anyone I've ever known. But instead, my mind was split in two. One part of me stood in mourning, trying to honor her memory. The other part, it was trapped in a loop, replaying the words my wife whispered to me the night before, words that changed everything. She was standing beside me now, her hand warm in mine. To the rest of the world, she looked like the perfect wife. She dabbed her eyes with a tissue, leaned against me for comfort, and every so often squeezed my hand like she was anchoring me to the earth. People must have thought we looked strong together, united in grief. And maybe, on the surface, that's exactly what we were. But inside, I was unraveling. Because every time her fingers brushed against mine, I remembered the way those same hands had trembled last night when she confessed. Every time she leaned her head against my shoulder, I remembered her voice, cracked and shaking, as she told me the truth she'd been hiding. The priest's voice echoed through the chapel, solemn and steady, but I barely heard him. My brother sniffled beside me. My aunt clutched a rosary. My father stared at the casket, his face carved from stone. Everyone was drowning in grief, but mine was tangled with something darker, heavier. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pull my hand away from hers, to stand up and shout what she had done. But I didn't. I kept my expression calm, my posture strong, because this wasn't the time. Not here. Not now. As people stood to give their eulogies, I forced myself to listen, nodding in the right places, pretending my heart wasn't tearing in two. Each word about my mother's kindness, her loyalty, her honesty, they stung, because they reminded me of what I'd lost, not just in her, but in the woman standing beside me. My wife leaned closer, whispering softly, "It's okay, I'm here," and I wanted to laugh or maybe cry, because she had no idea how much those words hurt now. The service stretched on, but I felt like I was holding my breath the entire time. My mother's coffin would be lowered into the ground before the day was over. But the secret my wife confessed, that was something I would carry far longer. If only they knew what I had heard the night before. The house was too quiet that night. After the wake, most of the family had drifted off to hotels or back to their homes. My father had fallen asleep in his chair, still wearing his suit from the service earlier. My brother sat in the corner of the living room, scrolling numbly through his phone, before finally mumbling a good night and retreating upstairs. And me? I stayed in the kitchen, staring at a cup of tea I hadn't touched. The steam had long faded, leaving the surface still and lifeless, just like the way the house felt without my mother's voice in it. I thought I was alone with my thoughts until I heard her footsteps. My wife. She moved cautiously, like someone afraid to disturb a fragile silence. "Hey!" she whispered, appearing in the doorway. Her hair was pulled back, her eyes swollen from crying, or maybe from something else. "You haven't come to bed." "I couldn't," I said, my voice raw. Every time I close my eyes, I see her. I hear her laugh. And then I remember I'll never hear it again. She stepped forward, her bare feet soundless against the kitchen floor. "I know," she murmured. "I know it hurts." But her tone was off. It wasn't just sympathy, it was hesitation. My gut tightened before I even knew why. I glanced at her, really looked at her, and realized her hands were trembling. She wasn't just tired. She was scared. "What is it?" I asked. Her lips parted, then pressed together again. She looked like someone standing on the edge of a cliff, too afraid to jump but too far gone to step back. "There's something I need to tell you," she said finally. Her voice cracked. "I can't go into tomorrow, into the funeral, carrying this. It's wrong. I need you to know." I frowned. "What are you talking about? This isn't the time. It has to be now." She cut me off, her voice desperate. "Because if I don't say it tonight, I'll never say it at all. And you deserve to know." My stomach dropped. "Know what?" She sat down across from me at the table, twisting her fingers together so tightly her knuckles went white. She looked at me like she was begging me not to hate her, even before the words came. "I've been seeing someone," she said. For a moment, the world just stopped. The hum of the refrigerator, the patter of rain against the window, even the ache in my chest. All of it disappeared, replaced by a hollow ringing in my ears. I stared at her, unable to process. "What?" Her eyes filled with tears. "It's not what you think. It wasn't. I didn't mean for it to happen. But it did. And I couldn't stand in that church tomorrow, hold your hand, and pretend like everything between us was pure. Not when it isn't." I shook my head slowly, like maybe I could rattle her words out of my skull. "Who?" Her silence was the answer I feared. "Who?" I repeated, sharper this time. Instead, I sat there, stone still, and gave the smallest nod. I wanted to scream, but instead I nodded. The morning of the funeral arrived with skies the color of ash. Rain clung to the edges of the church steps, leaving everything slick and cold. Mourners filed in, their umbrellas dripping, their faces pale with grief. I walked in among them, my wife at my side. To anyone watching, we looked united. Her hand laced with mine, her arm brushing against me as though she were my strength. But every touch was a spark against raw skin, unbearable, blistering. Every time her fingers squeezed mine, it felt like a lie being broadcast to the world. The service began with rituals that blurred together in my mind. Hymns drifted up into the vaulted ceiling. The priest's voice rose and fell, steady and unyielding. I caught fragments about faith, about eternal rest, about love that transcends death, but none of it sank in. My thoughts were a storm of grief and betrayal, crashing against one another until I could hardly breathe. My brother stood to speak. His voice trembled at first, but then steadied as he shared stories about Mom. The way she always made too much food, the way she laughed at her own jokes, the way she could turn even the smallest holiday into something special. People chuckled softly, nodding, tears slipping down their cheeks. I should have been laughing too, remembering those moments, but all I could see was Mark's face. My brother's voice and Mark's betrayal twisted together until I felt like I was drowning in poison. My wife slid her hand over mine again, her nails pressing lightly into my skin. "You okay?" she whispered, her lips barely moving. I didn't look at her. "Fine," I muttered. One word, flat and cold. To the others around us, it must have looked like comfort passing between us, a wife checking on her grieving husband. But inside me, that single word carried 1,000 unspoken screams. One by one, relatives and family friends stood, offering their memories, their condolences. The air grew heavier with each eulogy. When my father spoke, his voice was cracked but steady. "She was the heart of this family," he said, "and without her, we are broken." His hands shook as he gripped the podium, and I wanted to go to him, to wrap my arms around him, to give him some kind of strength, but I couldn't even find my own. All the while, my wife stayed close, playing her part flawlessly. She dabbed her eyes with tissues, nodded solemnly at each memory, even leaned her head against my shoulder for a moment, as if to say we would get through this together. And people noticed. They gave us looks of admiration. "Look how strong he is. Look how supportive she is." If only they knew. If only they could see the truth rotting beneath the surface. The final ritual came, the closing of the coffin. I stood as pallbearers moved forward, lifting the polished wood with practiced hands. My chest constricted as I watched them lower the lid, as I heard the dull, final click of it shutting. That sound echoed through me like a door slamming shut, not just on my mother's life, but on something in me as well. Because just as I had lost her forever, I knew I had also lost something else. My trust, my faith, the bond one thought I had with the woman standing beside me. The coffin was closed, and so was the part of me that had believed in us. Tears slid down my face, but no one knew they weren't just for my mother. They thought my grief was pure, clean, uncomplicated. But it wasn't. It was grief tangled with fury, heartbreak twisted into betrayal. My wife leaned in again, whispering, "You don't have to hold it in. You can cry." I turned my head just slightly, enough to let my words fall like ice. "I'm not crying for the same reason you think I am." Her breath hitched, but she stayed silent. She didn't dare push further, not with all those eyes around us. The service ended, people lining up to offer hugs, handshakes, murmured words of sympathy. I felt every touch like a weight pressing me deeper into the ground. "She's in a better place now," they said. "Stay strong. And always, you're lucky to have her by your side." Their eyes flicked toward my wife as they said it, admiration softening their features. Each compliment landed like a knife. Lucky. If only they knew what I had heard in the kitchen the night before. If only they knew that every time she squeezed my hand, it felt less like love and more like shackles. By the time the service ended, I was hollowed out. The church bells tolled, their sound heavy and relentless, like they were tolling not just for my mother but for the life I thought I had. And all I could think, as we walked out together into the gray drizzle, was how I had managed to fool them all. I had buried my mother that day, but what no one saw was that I was also burying my marriage, even if the world thought it was still alive. The house was full again after the funeral, but this time the silence was gone, replaced by the muted hum of voices and the clinking of dishes. People milled around with paper plates balanced in their hands, murmuring condolences between bites of casseroles and store-bought pies. The kitchen counters were crowded with food, a strange tradition, feeding the grieving, as though lasagna and brownies could fill the void left by my mother's absence. I stood near the living room window, watching droplets race each other down the glass. My wife hovered close, always within reach, her presence as suffocating as it was expected. She was playing her role perfectly, circulating through the room, hugging relatives, thanking neighbors for their kindness. Everywhere she went, she drew admiration. "She's been so strong for him," I heard my aunt whisper to another relative. "He's lucky to have her," someone else replied. Lucky, that word again, kept hitting me like a hammer to the chest. I turned my head slightly and caught sight of her across the room. She was listening intently to my cousin, nodding with just the right amount of sympathy etched into her face. To everyone else, she looked like the model of devotion. To me, she looked like a liar in disguise. I tried to shake the thought, but everywhere I went in the house, I overheard pieces of conversations that twisted like knives. "She's been holding him up through all this," one neighbor said. "She's the reason he hasn't fallen apart," another added. If only they knew. If only they could hear the confession I'd heard in the quiet of the kitchen the night before. If only they knew how every time she touched me, it felt like betrayal dressed up as comfort. I drifted through the rooms, smiling when expected, nodding when someone clasped my shoulder. But inside, I felt trapped, like a puppet dancing on strings I didn't control. Every word of praise for her bound me tighter to the lie we were telling. At one point, I stepped out onto the back porch, needing air. The drizzle had slowed, leaving the yard damp and glistening under a gray sky. I leaned against the railing, breathing deeply, trying to push down the anger simmering in my chest. I didn't hear her footsteps until she was right behind me. "Hey," she said softly. "Are you okay?" I didn't answer. She touched my arm, tentative. "Can we talk? Please, just for a minute." I shook my head. "Not here." Her voice lowered. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I hate that I hurt you, but I can't stand this distance between us. I need to explain." I turned to her, my expression cold. "You had months to explain. You chose the night before my mother's funeral." She flinched. Her hand dropped from my arm. I couldn't carry it anymore. And I thought if I told you, maybe we could start to heal." I laughed bitterly, the sound sharp and humorless. Heal? You think this is something we just patch up? You slept with Mark, my best friend, while I was taking care of my dying mother. And you want to talk about healing? Her eyes filled with tears. She opened her mouth, but I stepped away, leaving her words hanging in the damp air. Back inside, the noise of the gathering swallowed me again. I caught sight of my brother speaking with Mark near the dining table, both of them laughing softly about some old memory. The sight made my stomach twist. Did Mark's smile hide the same secret as hers? Did anyone else know? As I moved through the crowd, my mind kept replaying memories of our marriage. Small moments I'd brushed off at the time suddenly glared at me in a new, cruel light. The late nights at work, the sudden need for privacy when her phone buzzed, the times she'd seemed distant, distracted, only to smile when I asked if something was wrong. Back then, I told myself I was overthinking, that she was just tired or stressed. But now, all those puzzle pieces fit together into a picture I never wanted to see. I stopped near the hallway, gripping the doorframe as the weight of it all pressed down on me. Should I tell them? Should I stand in this very room, filled with my family and friends, and rip the mask off the woman they were praising? Should I shout the truth until the admiration in their eyes turned to disgust? The thought pulsed in me, hot and reckless. It would be so easy. Just one sentence and the facade would collapse. But then I thought of my father, sitting in his chair, hollowed out by the loss of his wife. I thought of my brother, already carrying too much grief on his shoulders. And I thought of my mother, the kind of woman who would have begged me not to turn her funeral into a battlefield. So I swallowed the urge. I buried the truth the same way we had buried her that day. But as I looked at my wife across the room, laughing softly with a cousin, I knew this secret wouldn't stay buried forever. And when it finally clawed its way to the surface, the damage would be permanent. That night, the house was quieter than ever. Guests had gone, dishes stacked in the sink, half-eaten casseroles sitting cold on the counters. My father had retreated upstairs, my brother too. The rooms were dark except for the faint glow of a lamp in the hallway, casting long shadows across the floor. Our bedroom felt like a tomb. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, my mother's funeral replaying in endless loops in my mind. The smell of lilies, the sound of hymns, the weight of hands on my shoulders as people told me how proud she would be of me. And always, the image of my wife at my side, her hand gripping mine, her voice whispering comfort. But underneath those memories ran another loop, darker, louder. Her voice from the night before. I've been seeing someone. It was Mark. The words repeated until they carved themselves into my skull. I turned on my side, then my back again. My chest tightened, my thoughts tangled. Insomnia wrapped around me like barbed wire. Beside me, she shifted, lying rigidly, pretending to sleep. I could hear her breathing, uneven and shallow. She wasn't asleep any more than I was. Finally, I couldn't take the silence. Why him? My voice cut through the dark, low but sharp. She didn't answer right away. Then, slowly, she turned toward me, her eyes wet even in the dim light. I don't know, she whispered. It was a mistake. A horrible, selfish mistake. That's not an answer, I said. My voice rose, anger trembling beneath it. You could have had anyone, and you chose him. The one person I trusted more than anyone. The man who carried my mother's coffin today. Her face crumpled. I didn't plan it. It just happened. I sat up, the mattress shifting under my weight. Don't give me that. Things don't just happen. You made choices. You chose to meet him. You chose to touch him. You chose to lie to me every single day. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She sat up too, clutching the blanket around her like it could shield her from my words. I regret it every second. I wish I could take it back. Please believe me, I love you. It was weakness, nothing more. I need you to see that. I stared at her, and for the first time in years, I couldn't find a single piece of love left in me to give her. My heart was full, but not with love. With grief. With betrayal. With something so raw it scraped against my ribs like glass. You know what I can't stop thinking about? My voice broke. While I was running back and forth between work and the hospital, barely sleeping, barely eating, trying to be there for my dying mother, you were sneaking around with him. While I was watching her fade away, you were betraying me. Do you have any idea what that feels like? She shook her head violently, tears soaking her face. I do. I know I broke you, and I hate myself for it. But please, please don't leave me. Don't let this be the end. We can get through this. I'll do anything. I'll cut him out of our lives forever. I'll earn your trust back, I swear. Her words tumbled out like frantic prayers, but they only hollowed me further. I buried my face in my hands, my shoulders shaking. I don't know what hurts more, I whispered. Losing my mother today, or realizing my marriage was already gone long before she took her last breath. The room went still. Her sobs quieted into broken whimpers. I lifted my head, meeting her eyes through the haze of my own tears. My voice was steady now, colder than it had ever been. I said goodbye to my mother today, I told her. And maybe, without even knowing it, I also said goodbye to you. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, as though those words had cut her deeper than anything else I could have said. But I meant them, every single one. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't sure which loss I would mourn longer. It's been weeks since the funeral, maybe months. Time has blurred into something unrecognizable, a stretch of gray days and sleepless nights. But one memory won't let me go. I see the church every time I close my eyes. The flowers, the coffin, the people gathered in quiet reverence. And I see her, my wife, standing beside me with her hand clasped in mine. To everyone else, it looked like devotion. To me now, it feels like chains. The world thought we were strong that day, united in grief. They thought her presence was my anchor, the one thing keeping me from collapsing under the weight of loss. They praised her for being so steadfast, so loving. And I let them believe it. I nodded, I smiled, I thanked them, all while knowing the truth. That her comfort was hollow, her love fractured, her loyalty already gone. I replay it constantly. The press of her hand, the way she whispered, "I'm here." Those words echo in my head, taunting me, because I know now she wasn't really here at all. Not in the way I needed. Not in the way I thought. I don't know what the future holds for us. Some days, I imagine trying to rebuild, clinging to the scraps of a marriage that feels beyond repair. I wonder if forgiveness is possible, if time can stitch wounds this deep. Other days, I think about walking away, about letting the pieces fall where they may, cutting free from the lies that bind me to her, about starting over even if it means being alone. I haven't made a choice yet. Maybe I'm too broken to decide. Maybe I'm still standing in that church in my mind, one hand on my mother's coffin and the other trapped in hers, torn between two kinds of grief. What I do know is this. Everyone thought I was grieving one loss that day, but in truth, I was grieving. I haven't made a choice yet. Maybe I'm too broken to decide. Maybe I'm still standing in that church in my mind, one hand on my mother's coffin and the other trapped in hers, torn between two kinds of grief. What I do know is this. Everyone thought I was grieving one loss that day, but in truth, I was grieving too. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to Confession Multiverse, where the most unforgettable confessions come to life.